What's up? Today I'd love to share with you how I went from 1600 to 2400 and became an international master in 2 years. So the first game is when I'm playing black and my strength at that point was about 1600. I'm playing against Silagi. And here we enter the Al-Khan defense. Now my goal for this video is to show you how I thought back then when I was rated 1600 and how this thinking process should be improved to bring yourself to the advanced level. And I do believe that this video is going to be very insightful, so I'm actually quite excited about it. So let's go ahead together. Now c4, knight b6. I go through these first few opening moves rather quick. They don't matter too much. Both sides just develop. So let's get to the point where we need to make some decisions. All right, so let's start from here. Prior to that, I kind of knew that I should just develop my pieces. I didn't do that. Now at this point, I started thinking. Now I realized here that white is going to play pawn d5. And that is actually not too good for me because I have to move my knight away and white gets more space. My position becomes cramped after that. And for that reason, I did not like the moves such as bishop g4 because white could go d5 and press me. And yes, black is not lost after that, but white is getting better. Now, first I gotta give credit to me that I even thought about my opponents at that level. That was already pretty good. And indeed, d5 is unpleasant. Now, however, what I did about that is I played d5 myself. And perhaps I was secretly hoping that he could take here and I would recapture and land my knight to this great square. He didn't, however. He played c5, and now there's another unpleasant thing, that this knight's gotta go, and there aren't many good squares for the knight to go to. So in fact, I have to bring it back to d7 to this awkward position. And although I can reposition it later, like right now, kind of these pieces are somewhat clumsy. Anyway, in the game, I didn't think that there's a problem here. I thought that from here, I'll be able to reposition the knight somewhere there, and it'll be fine. So that's how I thought back then. Now, let me now use the upgraded way of thinking, okay? And the first thing that I think about right now when I look at this position is, like, you gotta also have some general understanding of what the heck is going on here, right? Instead of just thinking about a single move. Right? And in general in chess, like, what do you want to do? You want to go forward, activate your pieces, and attack. That is it, fundamentally, right? And having this general understanding in your head actually makes many things easier. Because, for instance, right now, when I look at this position, I don't like the fact at all that my knight has to go backward here, even though I can, of course, reposition it later, but nevertheless, generally, it is against the nature of chess. You do not want to go back and make your pieces less active. So I would definitely try to find something else instead. And the move that comes to my mind right now, instead, is to strike with e5, because that also creates a threat. And whenever you can attack, that is often the right thing to do. Because again, in chess, you want to activate your pieces, you want to attack. That's it, fundamentally. Now, e5 creates a threat to this pawn. And now if he takes here, well, great. I traded off his active pawn for my less active pawn. There is no d5 threat anymore. Now I control the center. Things are cool. Here's another interesting question to you. If white goes d5, like, what do you play here? If you're a black, just think about this for a second. I think it's going to be really helpful if we go over this game together, because of course you understand that it's not about this game, because the same way of thinking will be applied to any position that you play. Now, back in the day, I would almost unthinkingly play knight e7. And nowadays, I would almost unthinkingly play knight d4. So that goes to show another difference, that in chess, again, you want to move forward. Like, that's the key idea about chess. You want to activate your pieces. And back in the day, I'd probably notice that I can go there, but I'd be thinking, I don't know, he can probably take it and my pawn is kind of weak. Maybe he can attack it. I don't know. I don't feel comfortable about that. Maybe I shouldn't go there. And after this, I would just retreat to the square that feels safer to me. So that would be my way of thinking when I was 1600. Now, nowadays, I know that I should go forward and I should definitely try to push that thing. And only if it completely does not work and I'm completely lost after that, only then I should think about alternatives. So nowadays, I would not think about this move at all. I will think about knight d4 with the idea that most probably it is the move that I want to play. And maybe I would quickly check if he can actually somehow easily grab this pawn, but if not, I'd go for it. Because then, even if, let's say, white can attack this pawn, there are many things that you can do. I mean, you can play queen f6, maybe, and defend it that way. Maybe you can even some crazy counter-attack knight a4 going after this pawn. You can maybe push this pawn forward, d3, and trade that pawn for this pawn, so that already solves the problem. There are many things that you can do, so I would say that probably in advance, it makes no even sense to think about it. Just you gotta play the move that you think is right, and if he takes, then you'll think about the consequences. Alright, let's go back. In the game I played d5, he pushed c5, and now my knight retreats back to d7. After that he played rook b1, he clearly wants to go b4, b5. Now I played e5. Now luckily for me, this move e5 to some extent justifies the position of this knight on d7. Because now I'm attacking his center, but if he captures, which he did, I can actually move my knight back to life with knight takes e5. So I was kind of in luck that I could untangle my pieces, but that was more of a luck factor, I would say. Now white played knight d4 here, and now I decided that I need to develop this bishop somehow, and I took on d4. So that this knight from d4 no longer controls the square. I can bring my bishop out and win a tempo. Okay, that was probably fairly nice. Rook c1. Alright, that's now the position where black has a choice of different moves. So how would you play here? We can also think about that for a second. In the game I just played queen d7. The idea was just to complete my development, connect the rooks. Generally speaking, it's a fine idea, and even right now, being a grandmaster, I'm fine with it. I'm fine with the move queen d7. I wouldn't be too critical about this. Having said that, again, now moving right now to where I'm a GM, I'd say that I don't like the move too much, even though it is an okay move. Why? Just because it's slightly passive. Like, the queen doesn't do much, whether it is on d8 or d7. And if you want to move a piece, there is a general idea that you actually want to move it as far as possible. And again, coming back to that generic idea that in chess you want to attack, you want to create problems for your opponent. If I want to move a queen, I would actually first look at most forward available moves, something like this. Or I create certain threats, and I would probably consider those moves first. Like queen a5, going there would potentially attack this pawn, and going queen h4 would hit the bishop from here. And actually, if I go there, it's not that easy for white to defend it, because I also have this bishop kind of x-raying the same thing, so it looks interesting to me. So those moves are seemingly more active. Maybe rook e8, because at least that's the move that I'm sure about, that the rook is good on an open file. So I can maybe play that move, and later decide where to put my queen. Anyway, in the game I played queen d7, a little bit passive, but overall fairly okay. Now white played knight f3. He also wants to do something. He is attacking my knight twice, so I gotta make a decision about that. And that is a really interesting moment. You can also think about this yourself. Which move would you play here if you were black? Now I'll tell you my way of thinking. In the game, I realized that the easiest solution is to trade on f3, and I'm pretty sure that the majority of players would probably do just that, because whenever there is a tension between pieces, it usually feels the easiest to just trade off. So yeah, that's the move that comes to mind first. But what I didn't like about this is that after this, the bishop comes forward to f3 and starts pressuring my weak isolated pawn on d5, and in fact, his queen is also putting pressure down here, and it feels kind of unpleasant. So I didn't like it too much, but then I thought, okay, what am I going to do about this? So I need to defend the knight, and I thought that maybe I can play f6 and guard it that way. Now I didn't like the move too much, because I realized that it blocks my own bishop. However, I thought, well, maybe if he captures at any point down the road, I recapture, then I have truly beautiful center, and it solves the problem. So at the time I wasn't sure, I wasn't happy about knight f3 because that activates his bishop. I wasn't happy totally about f6 because, yeah, that kind of locks my bishop. So I wasn't sure what to do, and ultimately I just played f6 because at least, I'm not losing this pawn quickly. So I felt that, okay, I'm still in the game. That's how I thought back then. Again, now let's upgrade the level of thinking. Now, the first thing, to the real OGs, you know that to take is a mistake, right? And that's the move that I formulated for myself later on, and it's extremely, extremely helpful. Whenever there is a tension between two pieces, such as this tension between knights, usually you do not want to release the tension for no reason. When you do that, in most cases you help your opponent to activate his pieces, such as in this example. Indeed, if you trade on f3, you help white to reposition his bishop to a more active square, and you do that voluntarily with your own move. You kind of help your opponent. By the way, if you continue doing the same mistake, if now you take on d4, you'll just keep making the same mistake over and over again. So that would be another mistake, because now that helps white to centralize his queen and put it to an active square. Now just think about this. 2 moves, just 2 exchanges. And it first seems like, well, we just traded off pieces which are of equal value, so nothing changed. Not at all. Now look at this. His bishop is active, his queen is active, he's putting pressure here, he's controlling all these weak squares, and he can stack heavy pieces along the d-file, and black is probably already lost. Just as after making two seemingly neutral exchanges. So to take is a mistake, and you do not want to take unless there is some specific reason of why you're doing that. Like if you need to take to avoid losing material, or you need to take to eliminate a defender and you have something to do after that, that's fine if you have a specific reason to do that. But do not exchange just for no reason, just because it feels easier to. Now, but here comes the next idea. If you don't want to release the tension, so what do you want to do? And the rule is keep up the tension. That's what you want to do. So how to keep up the tension, how to keep up this situation. And you can play rook e8, putting your rook to an open file, and at the same time guarding this knight. So that is exactly what you want. You want to keep up the tension, and you want to let your opponent make that mistake of releasing the tension. If your opponent is clueless about that rule to take as a mistake, then he's the one who's going to trade, helping you to reposition your rook to a much more active position. Now you can stack rooks along the e-file and put pressure down here. You can maybe push the pawn forward, and now white needs to be careful not to get in trouble. So that's how you flip the situation upside down. So rook e8 clearly is the move that I would play nowadays, and back in the day, somehow I think I did not even think about this move at all. I don't know why, but anyway, knowing these general guidelines are just so helpful, because if you know that you need to keep up the tension, so you are looking for ways to maintain the situation, and then rook e8 will come to your mind. Anyway, I played this ugly move f6, which nowadays I don't like a lot. It blocks the bishop, but on top of that, it also weakens a bunch of squares here, and pawns don't go back, so we can never recover from that. And I remember from a couple of my coaches, like one of my coach, Melanyuk, who was a strong grandmaster at the time, he said that he was coached by Korchnoi, who was the world challenger at the time. And he said that Korchnoi kind of always got angry when they moved pawns like that and weakened their position, even to the extent of slapping them by their hands, you know, while they play moves like that. Of course, back in the day, teaching wasn't as gentle as it is nowadays. Anyway, so like you do not want to weaken your position long term, and you only play those moves if there is nothing better. So f6, I don't like at all. Back in the day, I didn't see anything too much wrong with this, and I played it. Now white played queen b3. I went knight c6. Maybe I was concerned about him playing bishop b5 or whatever. I want to put pressure. I don't know. Rook d1. How do you play here if you're black? My way of thinking back then was, I see the move rook d1, so I'm asking myself, okay, what does he want? I see that he's probably wants to attack this pawn on d5, and I played rook d8 to solidify that pawn. So that's how I thought back then. Again, we're flipping this to the more advanced level of thinking. What do you want to do in chess? You want to attack, right? So I'd first check if I have any moves that attack something. And the move that clearly comes to mind is rook e8, because that creates a threat. Now, that's not a super devastating threat. Of course, white can move the bishop away, but nevertheless, I'm bringing my rook to an active position, and I'm attacking a bishop. That's nice. After he moves the bishop or does something, then I can decide what to do next. So that's what I would probably play nowadays. Then I play rook d8, which makes some sense, but just a little bit passive. White played bishop to e3. He wants to open up the rook so that he can put more pressure to this pawn, although the pawn is guarded right now, but he's got something in mind. By the way, let this be a little puzzle of the day for you. If black played something like a6, what would white play here? It is white to play. If you can find a good move, please write it down in comments below. Just making sure that you're still involved, all right, that you're also thinking yourself. Now, in the game, I played queen f7, just solidifying the position. White played bishop f4. Now he probably wants to bring the bishop right here, attack my rook. I played rook e8. Well, that's a nice thing. So I hit the bishop. Bishop went back. Now, what do you do here? Back in the day, my thinking was that he wants to go bishop d6, put his bishop to this active position, and after that, he probably wants to grab this weak pawn on d5 because he will cut off my rook from the defense. I wanted to stop that, and I played bishop f8. And normal move, but again, a little bit passive. That's the only thing that I dislike about it. Again, like, I gotta give credit to myself that I was attentive to what my opponent is trying to do. But the bad thing is that I was too passive in dealing with that. So nowadays, I would ask myself the simple question, which I always ask myself nowadays when I'm playing a middle game chess, like, how can I go forward to my opponent's half of the board and create threats? Because that's how you play middle game, generally speaking. Not always there is a way, but if there is a way to go there, that is often the best thing to do. And also it simplifies your thinking a lot, because usually that territory is controlled by your opponent. Therefore, most squares are just covered. And there are only a few options, like 1 or 2 options available. So you only consider those 2 moves and that's it. Now, in this position, if I'm asking myself, how can I barge into my opponent's territory and hopefully create threats? One move that I see is rook e4, hitting this bishop. So that's one. The other thing is maybe pawn d4, just pushing this pawn forward. And yeah, after d4, of course, you gotta check this thing so that you don't lose your queen. But right now, black can cover with his own bishop. Therefore, that is all right. So I would consider either d4 or rook e4, and I would pick one of these 2 moves. And I would only not play them if they're completely lost. Only then I would start looking for anything else. So that's how I would think nowadays. Back in the day, I just played bishop f8. You see that, in fact, like, lots of these ideas are actually the same from one move to the other. And that's the beauty of this thinking. There are, in fact, very few components that you need to level up in order to get yourself to potentially the level of international master. You see what I'm saying here is not rocket science. That's something that you can comprehend, and with some training, you can get used to playing in this style. All right. Now, bishop f8, white went knight d4. He wants to attack here and here. So I traded, rook takes, and actually, from here on, black is indeed at a pretty dull and passive position. This pawn is weak. White wants to long-term to double up against it and capture it, and black does not have much to do. There's not much counterplay, and I lost the game later on. Now, if you're curious, I'll drop the complete game in comments below. You'll find the link there. But for now, I want to switch on to the next game, and we'll see how this whole thing should work together. This game was played 2 years later. I'm still playing black, this time against Arbakov, a Grandmaster, and this is a memorable game for me because that is my first victory over a Grandmaster in an official tournament. And right here, I'm not an international master yet, but I became an international master later that year, so we could assume that I'm playing at that strength already. Now, I'm going knight f6. Initially, it's the Catalan opening, just development moves. Again, I don't stop here that much. Now, what do you do in an opening? Generally speaking, well, you just develop your pieces, right? So that's what I'm doing here. b6, bishop b7, pawn e4. Perhaps the first interesting moment. How do you play here if you're black? Well, I guess that after our analysis, you know that there is a catch here, right? Most players in such positions take here unthinkingly. And what strong players do is unthinkingly, they don't take at all, right? They just know that to take is a mistake. Shouldn't do this. If you take, you help your opponent to relocate his knight to a more central position, also to unblock the bishop, and you do that with your own move. Therefore, I'm not saying you should never ever in your life take anything, but I'm saying that you should be very thoughtful about this and only do this if there is a specific reason of why you do this. Don't take just because there is an opportunity to do that. And in the game, I played knight d7, just completing my development, following my own plan. White goes b3. Now, what do you want to do now? Well, probably black wants to play c5, just to activate the bishop, because it's currently blocked by this pawn chain, and also to counter strike in the center. I played rook c8 first, which was also a decent move, just preparing myself, and then playing c5. Notice that in this case, I'm not releasing the tension, I'm actually doing the opposite. I'm keeping up the tension and I'm increasing the tension. And that is what strong players do. They want his opponent to take and to help them. Like if white, for instance, takes right here at some point, guess what? It's going to help me open up a file for my rook. Of course, black will recapture, but down the road, it's going to be helpful. If white ever takes on c5, that's going to help me activate either my knight or my bishop, which is also nice, right? So that's what I want. I don't want to release the tension. I want him to do that. Now, at this point, white took on d5. I recaptured, and white realized that there is a little bit unpleasant opposition of the rook against the queen, and he played queen f5. Now, what do you do here? That's an interesting question. Like the first thing, which I'm proud of, is that I haven't played g6. Remember, in the last game I played f6 and then suffered because of those weaknesses. So this time, I'm learning from my past errors. I know that I shouldn't weaken my position unless there is a specific reason, and if there is nothing better. So g6 is a move. I'm not saying that it's a bad mistake. It's a move to consider to kick off the queen from here, but it weakens these weaknesses, right? And long term, he's got a bishop standing there. And there could be some problems. I mean, again, you may consider this, but I'd say that if there's something better, you should probably prefer that. And if there's nothing better, then maybe g6. So I'm looking for other ways. In the game, I took here on c4. And you may argue that, hey, I'm violating my own rule to take some mistakes. Why am I doing this? Well, the thing is, you gotta consider forcing moves, but which doesn't mean that you should make them. You gotta consider in the sense that you got to think about them, because sometimes you can play a force and move and win something, or play a force and move and there is some follow-up that lets you have certain advantage, and then it's all right to play them. But if there is no follow-up, then you don't. For example, c takes d4 would be just that standard mistake. That would help white to activate the knight, that would open up a diagonal for his bishop, and that's pretty bad for black. So that would be just that common example of to take is a mistake. But taking on c4 is a little bit different, because I'm also opening up a diagonal for my bishop. Also, after knight takes c4, I realize that I've got a follow-up, which is a move bishop to e4. And I'm kicking this queen away without weakening my position. And generally speaking, as we know from the previous example, I always love the idea when I can move my piece forward to opponent's half of the board and attack something. That's just perfect, right? So here I was pretty happy about this move. Bishop e4, white goes queen to f4. Now, what do you do next? Same question. In the middle game, after you have completed your basic development, you developed your minor pieces, you castled, then you want to attack. You want to go forward and create threats. Now, with that being said, I can see pawn b5 hitting the knight, or maybe bishop d3. Now, which one do you love more? On a side note, I realize that this video is going to be lengthier than usual. It's not a 10-minute video, and I'm sorry about this, but I really want to share this with you. I think if you stick around, it's going to be super helpful, and within this like 20 minutes or so, you may possibly learn more than in 2 years of studying chess, because these are the insights that took me years to comprehend, and I'm just trying to present it to you, as much as I can within this one short video. All right, so bishop d3, although it looks like an attacking move, but I do not like it too much. Because normally an intent of an attack is to activate your position and push your opponent backwards, force him to worsen his position, right? And bishop d3, yeah, it hits the rook on one hand, but he can move the rook either to e1 to an open file, or maybe to d1 and even counter-attack your own bishop and put a rook to this open file. So I don't see how it creates any troubles for white, it rather helps white. And that's why I would not say that it is an attacking move, right? It's more of that one mover which doesn't make much sense beyond that. In that sense, b5 is something that I like much more. I'm expanding, providing some more space for my own pieces to move around, and also even this pawn can go forward to c4 in the future, possibly. Now, after b5, white played knight d2 to gain a tempo, attacking my bishop. Now, how do you play here? A lot of players in such positions, when they realize that the bishop is hanging, they just move it back to safety. And strong players know that you should first and foremost consider forward moves. So I played bishop d3. In this sense, it is justified because the bishop had to move anyway. So I'm not wasting a tempo, I'm winning a tempo by attacking the rook. Also, with this knight on d2, he cannot that easily counter-attack me. White played rook c1. He's trying to, put some pressure along the c-file. Now, how do you play here? Same question. Can you move forward and attack anything, right? So I saw the move knight d5, I played the move knight d5. Playing strong moves sometimes it's actually even easier, because what I realize while looking at a ton of games of my students, as well as my own games back in the day, quite often the problem is lack of clarity, lack of priorities, so to say. Because back in the day, I would be looking at this position and kind of feeling puzzled of, like, should I take here? Should I do something about this tension? Or should I maybe bring my queen out or activate my knight somehow, or maybe I should put my rook to an open file. And I would be thinking about all these moves and feeling overwhelmed and not sure what to do, and I would ultimately randomly pick one of them, probably. So that's how I would think when I was 1600. So it's not that I, at that point, did not know anything about chess. Of course, I knew different ideas, but there was just a bunch of ideas in my head, and I didn't know which one to prioritize and which one really to think about. Now, as we upgrade the level of thinking, when you understand generically what you want to do, and in the middle game you want to attack, go forward, create threats, expand, so that's what you want, now that gives you a clear guideline, and you just think about that first and foremost. And if that works, and usually it does work, you just play that without thinking about anything else. So you see that it's not only stronger, but it's also way easier, actually. So here I'm going knight e5, because I moved my piece forward and attack the queen. Queen comes here. Now, following the same pattern, I go knight f6, moving my own piece forward, and hit his piece. Plays queen h3. Now, what do you do now about this situation? Hope that now you already have some clues, right? You already know that you should be skeptical about pawn takes d4, and you should only play that if there is certain specific follow-up, certain specific reason of why you want to do that, because otherwise that only helps him to activate either his bishop or knight. Now, in the game, I ask myself, how can I move forward to my opponent's half of the board and create certain threats? And the solution was simple, playing pawn c4. Now, not only avoiding the pressure right here, but also, after this exchange, My pawn is ready to go forward and double attack these minor pieces, therefore that is also an attacking move. Now white played knight e5, and here there is another interesting position to think about. You may also think about this yourself for a second. If you do, I mean, that I think will be a nice insight. Now, funnily enough, the way I think it remains to be the same. Now, with the knight e5 move, white wants to attack this pawn on c4, so that's the immediate threat. White wants to take it with either of his knights. It also possibly puts some pressure to this bishop, right? So that's what he wants. And indirectly, this also opens up diagonal for that bishop from g2. So knight e5 makes perfect sense for white. And a lot of players would just start thinking about this pawn and how to guard it. But my way of thinking remains to be that simple. I mean, I'm just asking myself the very same question. How do I move forward and attack? Just in this case, it happens to be a counterattack, because if you are under the attack, your own attacking move technically becomes a counterattack. But the fun fact is nothing changes. The way I think it remains to be the same. And I played c3, the move that my opponent probably overlooked because it hands the bishop right here, but it counters this knight and this bishop. And counterattacking moves are so strong. You know, I remember I actually won a number of games against grandmasters even by using counterattacking moves, because that's what people typically overlook, because the natural pattern of thinking is that I attack, he defends. That's what people are expecting from you. But when I attack and all of a sudden I'm attacked back, that often comes as an unpleasant surprise for people. But you see that finding counterattacking moves can actually be very simple, because the way of thinking remains to be the same. Anyway, pawn c3, so white took right here. I recaptured on d2, this time it hits the rook as well. White traded everything on c8. Now I'm also putting pressure here. So white traded. Now this pawn on d2, on one hand, of course, is an asset. It's close to the square of promotion. On the other hand, is far away from the rest of my army. And white played king f1. He just wants to go here and capture this pawn. So we got to do something about that. Now, in the game, I followed my way of thinking and I played knight c3. Not the best move. Now, there were two better options, actually. One, recommended by Stockfish, is to reposition the bishop back to d8 and a5 and to guard the pawn in this unusual way. Now, frankly, I didn't see this maneuver at all. Just because for human, it's usually unnatural to put your pieces to an edge of the board. And the classical rules suggest that you should bring them closer to the center rather than moving them to the side. So yeah, it was a good maneuver. I overlooked it. I wouldn't be too critical to myself about this, because again, in most cases, moving your bishop back to d8 is a bad move. Just in this particular case, it was necessary to use this round maneuver to guard the pawn. That was the second thing which I missed, and that is, I would say, was wrong from my side, so I'm not happy about that. There was a move rook to c2, which I saw, but the problem with this move is, yeah, you're going inside, you're putting a little bit of pressure. It's not an attacking move yet, because this bishop is already guarded. And the problem with this move is that white wants to go king e2, and then king d1, attack the rook, push it back, and then grab this pawn on d2. And I rejected the move for that reason. But while analyzing the game with computer suggests here killing blow. You can think about this for a few seconds and find tactics that I missed in the game. It was the move bishop a3. Beautiful move that would won the game. Now I'm attacking right here. From here it's going to attack the rook as well. But the problem for white is he can't take, because if he takes here, there's knight c3 check to the king, and I'm controlling this square as well, so I can't move there with his king. He has to move away somewhere, and after this, I could either promote right now and win some material, win the exchange, or even stronger, I can actually take on a2 first, trying to deflect the rook, and the rook has no squares to go to on the first rank, because they all are controlled by black. And after the rook moves away, let's say somewhere here, I can just queen, and that would win the game on the spot. So that is the tactics that I missed. That was the best thing for black to play. Back to the game, I played knight c3, which is inferior, but not too bad. So at least I'm not losing anything. Now knight c3 aims to promote, which forces white to trade. Now rook takes, attack the knight. White goes king e2, he wants to take the pawn. And what do we do in such cases? Just as usual, we are looking for attacking moves. So I play rook c4, aiming to counterattack. White played d5. The pawn is guarded, so I can't take it with my knight, but I can go rook d4, and put the second attack. So now he's taking my pawn, I'm taking his. And initially it looks like a drawish situation because we exhausted most of the material, but things are not that simple for white still. Black is more active, this rook is still in the corner on his starting position, and right now knight b4 is a threat actually taking advantage of this pin. So although it's of course objectively speaking should be a draw ultimately, white still needs to be careful, there are certain threats that they still need to parry. Now he played a3 correctly, stopping this move. And here I played... Oh, by the way, that's another interesting question. What do you do if there is no attack? Like, you ask yourself first that question, how can I go forward, my opponent's half the board, and attack something? But what if there are no attacking moves? What do you do then? Well, the answer is pretty simple and straightforward as well. You prepare an attack on the next move if you can't attack immediately. Now, I realize that the move I'd wish to play generally is rook a4 and attack this pawn twice. That would be an attacking move. My opponent's half the board, that creates a threat. But I can't play it right now because that would drop the knight on d5. So I just played knight b6 with the intent that I can, after that, either go rook a4 and attack the pawn, or I can maybe go knight c4 with this double attack to the king and pawn. Right, notice that I played king c2. Now I played g6, probably slightly inferior. Perhaps it was better actually to go knight c4 and to execute that attacking move. I played g6, which is not too bad either, just providing this escape square so that there are no back rank problems in some lines. Now white played knight e5. He's trying to control this square so that I can't go there and attack him. I'm going bishop f6, attacking the knight. Goes rook e1. Now, what do you do now? As usual, you're looking for ways to attack anything. I played rook a4, hitting this pawn. King b3. And although temporarily looks like white actually neutralized all the threats, but what helps black is little tactics. And remember I said before that you should calculate forcing moves, which are checks captures for the most part. Which doesn't mean that you should always play them, but you should consider them because sometimes there is a strong follow-up. So in this case, I realized that I can trade here, and generally speaking, this exchange would be a bad mistake because we release the pressure, we help our opponent. But here I have one more forcing move, rook takes a3, which is a little tactics because after that I've got knight c4 follow-up with a fork. The king is in check, it has to move now, knight takes e5, and ultimately black got a winning endgame where I've got this extra pawn. But white can't easily just move here and try to capture it because that would abandon the king side. And I can then, in that case, go forward, go after these pawns and start capturing them and advance my own king there and pick up these kingside pawns, which would be left undefended. So I ultimately won this game. I mean, there were many moves, so to not waste your time, I'll skip this. Again, if you can see complete games, there will be a link down below in the description. One thing that I love about these different principles, which are helpful for you while playing chess, is that you can see that, yes, it requires like new ways of thinking and some practice. However, it's not rocket science. Like, you don't have to be supernaturally gifted person who started studying chess as a toddler to comprehend that. Like, anybody can, right? And of course, I tried my very best to help you with this video. Hopefully, you saw those clear ideas on how you can level up in chess. If you want to have my complete help with bringing you to the level of 2000, I've got a dedicated course, Level Up, in chess, where I really have it all figured out for you, where I'm having this section for the opening, what you should know about openings, middle games, end games, how to study chess, and also how to avoid blunders, which is plus 300 rating points at an instant if you just reduce the amount of blunders that you make. So I put it all together in a single course together with practice where you can practice these skills. I recorded games where I'm playing live and I'm showing exactly how I think and how you can do the same. So put it all together, and if you're curious, you can find this course by clicking the link below the video. Either way, I hope that you got a lot of value. Let me know if you have any comments or any feedback about this, and let's stay in touch.